The whispers started before the wedding even began. Some people tried to hide them behind polite smiles. Others didn't bother. 3 daughters and barely enough money to feed them. She could have had anyone. What a waste. Sophia Bennett heard every word. Standing at the small country church in her simple ivory dress, she could see the judgment in their eyes. Friends she had grown up with looked at her as if she were throwing her life away. Even some relatives shook their heads in quiet disappointment. Because the man waiting for her at the altar wasn't wealthy. He wasn't successful. He wasn't young. Daniel Harper was a widower raising 3 daughters alone in a weathered farmhouse on the edge of town. His wife had died 4 years earlier after a long illness, leaving him heartbroken and struggling to keep his family together. Since then, he worked long days doing odd jobs, repairing fences, fixing tractors, and helping neighboring farmers whenever he could. Most weeks, money was tight. Some weeks, it was nearly non-existent. Yet when Sophia looked at Daniel, she didn't see poverty. She saw something everyone else seemed blind to. She saw a man who spent every spare dollar on his daughters before spending a penny on himself. She saw a father who braided little girls' hair before sunrise. A man who packed lunches, kissed scraped knees, read bedtime stories, and carried grief without allowing it to harden his heart. She saw kindness. And kindness was rarer than wealth. As the church doors opened and she walked down the aisle, people expected hesitation. Instead, Sophia smiled. Because she knew exactly what she was doing. What she didn't know was that her decision would eventually shock everyone who had laughed at her, including herself. The first year of marriage wasn't easy. The farmhouse was old. The roof leaked during storms. The kitchen floor creaked. The truck broke down so often that Sophia joked it should have its own hospital room. Money disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived. But somehow, their home felt rich. Not in dollars. In love. Daniel's daughters, Emily, Sarah, and Lily, slowly accepted Sophia into their lives. At first, they were cautious. They worried she might leave. After losing their mother, trusting someone new felt dangerous. But Sophia never forced her way into their hearts. She simply showed up every day, helping with homework, attending school plays, baking birthday cakes, listening when they needed someone to talk to. Over time, the walls around their hearts began to crumble. One evening, nearly a year after the wedding, 8-year-old Lily climbed into Sophia's lap during a thunderstorm. "Can I tell you something?" she whispered. "Of course." Lily wrapped her arms around her neck. "I forgot what it felt like to have a mom." Sophia felt tears fill her eyes. "But now I remember." That night, she cried after everyone had gone to sleep. Not because she was sad, because she had never received a more valuable gift. Meanwhile, the people who had criticized her continued watching from a distance. They expected the marriage to fail. They expected arguments, regret, disappointment. Instead, the family seemed happier every year, which only confused them. Then came the drought, the worst in decades. Local farms suffered massive losses. Fields turned brown. Streams dried up. Livestock struggled. Many families faced financial disaster. Daniel worked harder than ever, helping neighbors repair irrigation systems and save what crops they could. Yet despite his efforts, their own situation became increasingly difficult. Bills piled up. Savings vanished. The future looked uncertain. One evening, Sophia found Daniel sitting alone on the porch. His shoulders looked heavier than she had ever seen. "What's wrong?" she asked gently. He stared toward the distant hills beyond their property. "There's something I've never shown you." Sophia sat beside him. "What is it?" Daniel hesitated. Then he smiled softly. "My father used to call it our hidden valley." The next morning, he led her through a section of dense forest behind the farmhouse. Sophia had lived there for years and had never explored that far. The walk took nearly an hour. Then suddenly the trees opened. Sophia stopped breathing. Before them stretched a breathtaking valley unlike anything she had ever seen. Crystal clear water flowed through a winding creek. Wildflowers covered rolling meadows. Ancient oak trees stood like guardians over the landscape. Sunlight spilled across the valley in golden waves. It looked like something from a painting. "How is this possible?" Sophia whispered. Daniel smiled. "My family has owned this land for generations." She stared at him. "You own all of this?" He nodded. "Nearly 600 acres. Sophia's jaw dropped. "Daniel, I know. Why didn't you tell anyone? His expression grew thoughtful. Because people change when they see value? He knelt beside the creek. My father always said land should serve people, not control them. Sophia looked around. The valley was extraordinary, potentially worth millions. Yet Daniel had kept it hidden, protected, untouched. Have you ever considered selling it? She asked. Daniel shook his head. Never. At first, Sophia couldn't understand. The sale could solve every financial problem they had ever faced. But over time, she began to understand something deeper. To Daniel, the valley wasn't wealth. It was responsibility. Months later, devastating floods struck nearby communities after unusually heavy rains. Entire neighborhoods were damaged. Families lost homes. Many had nowhere to go. As emergency shelters filled beyond capacity, local officials struggled to find solutions. That was when Daniel made a decision. Without hesitation, he opened the hidden valley. Temporary housing was built on sections of the land. Emergency supplies were stored there. Displaced families found safety. Volunteers arrived from surrounding counties. Within weeks, the valley had become a refuge for hundreds of people. News spread quickly. Soon reporters began arriving. People who had never paid attention to Daniel suddenly wanted interviews. Many were stunned. The poor widower they had dismissed owned one of the most beautiful and valuable pieces of land in the region. But what shocked them even more was what he chose to do with it. He wasn't selling it. He wasn't developing luxury resorts. He wasn't cashing in. Instead, he was giving, again and again. As months passed, Daniel partnered with local organizations to create community gardens, educational programs, and conservation projects throughout the valley. Children learned about nature. Families gathered for events. Veterans found peaceful places to heal. People who had lost everything found hope. The valley became known not for its value, but for its impact. One afternoon, a reporter asked Daniel the question everyone wanted answered. Why keep helping strangers when this land could make you incredibly wealthy? Daniel glanced toward Sophia and his daughters. Then he smiled. Because enough people spend their lives trying to own more. He paused. Very few spend their lives trying to give more. The interview went viral. Across the country, people shared his words. Donations poured into community projects. Volunteers traveled from multiple states. The valley became a symbol of generosity in a world that often seemed focused on greed. Yet the most emotional moment came months later during a community celebration. Hundreds gathered in the valley. Families laughed. Children played. Music drifted through the evening air. As the sun began setting, Emily, the oldest daughter, stepped onto a small stage. She looked nervous. Then she picked up a microphone. There's something we want to say. Sarah and Lily joined her. The crowd fell silent. Emily looked directly at Sophia. Years ago, people thought our dad was giving us everything he had. She smiled. They were wrong. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. He gave us someone even more valuable. Lily's voice trembled. A mom. The crowd grew quiet. Sophia covered her mouth. Sarah stepped forward. Everyone talks about the hidden valley. She pointed toward the surrounding landscape. But that's not the greatest treasure our family found. Then all three daughters looked at Sophia. You are. Tears streamed down Sophia's face. Daniel slipped his hand into hers. For a moment, nothing else existed. Not the crowd, not the applause, not the valley. Only the people she loved. The people she had chosen when everyone else doubted her. Years earlier, strangers had mocked her for marrying a poor widower with 3 daughters. They thought she was sacrificing her future, settling for less, making a mistake. What they failed to understand was that true wealth rarely announces itself. Sometimes it arrives disguised as responsibility, as kindness, as a tired father doing his best, as 3 little girls needing someone to love them. And sometimes the greatest treasure isn't hidden beneath a valley of rolling green hills. Sometimes it is hidden inside the hearts of ordinary people who choose compassion over comfort and generosity over gain. In the end, the valley revealed something far more valuable than land. It revealed character, and while money can build houses, only love can build a home. Sophia had known that from the very beginning. That was why she walked down the aisle smiling. And years later, standing hand in hand with the family she loved, she knew with absolute certainty that she had married the richest man she had ever known.